Something I wanted to talk about for a while, but Will Stancil came out and posted, so it reminded me I want to discuss this because I've been thinking about. There's a lot of things I want to say, but they're just floating in my mind, and then something evokes. I want to mention this, right? So the billionaires have an orbit network online. The same people posing as crazy leftists go on X and pose as Nazis. You think I'm fucking with you? That's actually going on, okay? So a lot of these and they're very clockable. They're clocky, to borrow a word from trans culture. They're so clocky, right? They have the same formula. They generally post with a cartoon or a statue. They're always hyper and on. They never show any because they're not real people. A lot of these radical leftist or Nazis are literally the fabrication of some dude who's working for the CIA, who's working for billionaires. Yeah. And they're very clockable. Like I said, they usually post with a cartoon. They usually never show anything about themselves because they don't really exist in real life. They're sitting in like a bot farm with like 100 computers open, and they're not foreign. They're from our own billionaires and the CIA, and they're making both the majority of these Nazis on X and these far leftists on both Blue Sky and X. The people whose Will Stancil's fighting with most of the day are working on the same team as him. They're all just working for the billionaires. This is a fact, right? So, one thing I wanted to discuss that really, really pisses me off, but it's not, nothing should piss me off because it's over. The society is dead, right? They do this thing where they will slander socialism as nazism. It's like this incredible mind fuck where they make discussing any economic justice issue nazism. They like kind of like what they did to me. They slandered me as a Nazi. They twisted a lot of things I've said over the years to make me into a Nazi. I mean, like, my youth aside, where I was literally a fucking kid who hadn't left the house since I was 15 years old, a lot of the things that I've said, they've completely twisted the context, what I was meaning. It doesn't fucking matter, but I'm just telling you this is what they do. They will literally lie and say people are Nazis. So they did this to Bernie Sanders. They amazingly made focusing on the labor movement a form of Nazism. So, for example, Will Stancil's ass lickers, who all take checks from billionaires, highlighted some Bernie quote where he's mentioning how the H-1B visa program was always labor exploitation and it needs to be stopped. Basically, he was mentioning how H-1B visas, the people are right that it's bad, right? And this motherfucking piece of shit twisted his points to be anti-immigration in an American nativist sense. So infuriating because you can see that Bernie is old as shit. His track record is clear, right? In the 90s, he was explaining to dumbasses that the billionaires use nationalism and anti-immigrant sentiments to control you, right? You can find these videos out there of literally Bernie in the 90s explaining if you're a fucking billionaire and you want to trick people to go broke, what do? You stoke social division. This is like a famous Bernie video. There is a 0% chance what Bernie meant was, I don't want immigration. What he meant was the H-1B visa program was designed to create indentured servitude, to exploit labor. These people should be getting the same protections as any American worker. That meaning what he's trying to say is he's defeating the lie Trump is saying that the reason we need H-1B visas is because they're more talented than you. What there is absolutely an element of truth. They don't want the H-1B visas because they're more talented, but because they can exploit them, because they are in a poor social position and they can exploit them. And any progressive should be fighting against that. Any progressive should care about that and be fighting against that. Not in the sense you shouldn't be able to come here because you're an immigrant. Not in the sense Americans are better than you. in the sense the H-1B visa program was invented to exploit labor, to devalue the progressive labor movement, and we should make it easier for talented engineers from other countries to come here, and they should be treated just like American laborers, umbrellaed under American labor protections. That would reduce the motive to make programs, because it would now be illegal, where you can come here to work, and by the way, we can do anything to you. You take what you we give you, or you don't get anything. Anyone saying that that's nazism is a fucking billionaire patsy. And this is something they've managed to do. They get these fake Democrats who stoke the culture war. And by the way, they always talk about Epstein and Trump. You know, Trump was a Democrat when he was running with Epstein. And Bill Clinton's on there too. The same people who were knee deep in Epstein, you don't think Obama knew about that, are supposed to save us, hired by these billionaires. It's a fucking joke. They're so unethical, so dirty. They're such scum. They if anything, the Epstein scandal should be evidence to the American people. We need a revolution. All these people on the top gotta go. Every last one. They're rapists, they're murderers, they're criminals. They view you as slaves to use. It shouldn't, the conclusion shouldn't be Trump is a bad man. You're all bad. You on the New York Times bestseller list, you with this piece of shit book encouraging people to scapegoat the bottom. All of you are pieces of shit. You all have to go. I find it really weird any liberal would walk away from this like Trump is a uniquely bad person. I mean, he's a piece of shit. We have Epstein on record saying he's even worse than Ehud Barak, that he's the worst man he ever met. So I guess that Katie Johnson story and worse is probably true. He's probably spraying him like fucking little girls and shit. But the takeaway should not be this will all get better when Trump is gone. If anything, that's why I find so insane why the Democrats are pumping this Epstein thing, because it's like any logical, intelligent person should conclude all of you have to go. You're all evil. You're okay with evil. You're comfortable with evil. And Trump and Bill Clinton were Democrats when Epstein was in full swing. So, I mean, that should tell you everything you need to know about how decent the Democrats are and how likely it is that they're billionaire patsies throwing it on purpose, right? They're not inept. They're not weak. They're hired to be a fake opposition, and you all have to go. I find it really weird. They think this Epstein angle works for them, right? But you know, people are stupid, so it might work for them. But honestly, the correct deductive logic is you all have to go. All of you are corrupt. All of you take money from these billionaires. All of you are horrible, evil people. You all need to go. None of you are clean. You're all bad. All of you are controlled by these billionaires, and you're evil, deeply evil people. That should be the conclusion. But I don't know. Instead, they think people are gonna walk away from this like Trump is the only one who's bad, and we have to get rid of him and go back to voting for Democrats. I don't know. I still vote. I vote for Democrats simply because the way I look at it is like, in the event I'm wrong and we still do have free elections, it's harder for them to do their schemes when the Democrats win office. That's how I look at it. So I'm like, that's why the only reason I vote for them, not because I actually believe in them, or at this point I believe we have real free elections. I could see it's all fake. Really, really suspicious how every swing state went to Trump, and the votes were just below the point where a recount would be called. None were razor thin for a hand recount. Anyway. Yeah, this thing they do where anyone who's a socialist, they try to reframe the labor movement, economic justice as a form of, oh, are you saying we shouldn't have immigrants? It's like, no, he's literally talking about the economic exploitation of immigrants to sabotage the labor movement. His point is not, I don't want different people here. They do this all. This is why I think this Plattner guy could have been real, because this is the same thing they always fucking do. If they can at all contort it that they're a Nazi like they're white, they will always go to, like, anyone who's a socialist, they will always say they're a Nazi, or what they're advocating for is a Nazi point. And it's so infuriating because it's evil. Like, they're actually talking about what's really going on here to affect people, and they're reframing something so essential the liberal progressive labor movement as nazism. And wealth concentration, a few people's hands owning everything, is actually the heart of nazism. You know how I know? Because the capital elites of Germany paid for Hitler because they were so scared of socialism, right? So what you people are about are way fucking closer to nazism. And these shitty accounts online that have cartoon pictures and they never show themselves in real life because they don't really exist. And they post as Nazis, they post as leftists. They will all converge on this point. They will attack any real socialist as a Nazi, which is what I don't know shit about Platinum. I don't really give a fuck either. But the sheer effort the cartoon PFP accounts are putting into calling him a Nazi makes me think he might have been a real socialist and they want him out. Because they're doing overtime calling this guy a Nazi. It's very similar to what they did to Bernie. Like they call whenever he speaks of the basic progressive foundation of the labor movement, they try to reframe his message that he's an American nativist who hates immigrants. Like they're just such dirtbags. And what they're about is actually Nazism in the sense they capital holders invented Nazism as an alternative to socialism. So let's be real. Y'all promoted fascism as an alternative to socialism. That's how we got the fascist revolution. After the depression, you were fucking shitless. Those countries would go socialist, so you promoted fascists there. That's and you've been doing that all throughout the Cold War. Whenever you were afraid a country would go commie, you would try to promote like some nativist right nationalist would work with you. So let's be real. It's so upsetting because it's such a lie and it's so evil. I can't stand these people. I don't know how these people deal with it. And then they have the audacity to say they're immortal and they're better than anyone. Mediocre crony trash who just parasitically live off the people, confusing them. Anyone who utters real socialism, they call them a Nazi. And then the cartoon P. This is what I find amazing. Like the cartoon PFP squad hired by the billionaires, they do such a better job posing as Nazis. When they try to pose as leftists, it's so bad because they're in their core, they're power obsessed, unequal fucks, right? They're just these Gen X, unequal, power hungry, abusive monsters. So they role play Nazis way better. When they're role playing Nazis on X, the most unbelievable thing about it is that they think race is power, like that aspect of it. Like you can tell they don't. Like when they'll do stuff like make an account and they're a weirdly pro-Italian and pro-Catholic, you can tell it shines through. They think that's a joke, and the real power is money and the elites, right? But in all other ways, they're very convincing Nazis. Like how they're so gender typical, how the males are into violence and sex and gore and just crushing things and manipulating, how the women like take on a Ghislaine role. They'll be passive and sweet. They'll post the blonde hair icon. Um, and they're very in they role play these rigid gender roles as an example of how power hungry they are. They're not into flexibility or gray areas. They're into performing the thing that can make them control society. If they're female, then they're hyper feminine and passive, and they support the men who are violent and crushed, abusive, right? So when they're posing as Nazis, they do a better job because Nazis are like that too. When they pose as leftists, it's so unbelievable. So they'll usually when they make a leftist account with a cartoon, they'll make them have some kind of gender identity thing, but they can't do it because they exude thug, animal, hyper performing a gender role to navigate society to gain power. So they'll make like a cartoon leftist girl who is non-binary, but in all her behavior, she behaves like a trad wife. Like she'll have a blonde icon. She'll be like, hee hee, very sweet, act like Taylor Swift. And by the way, the Taylor Swift character that we now know and love was created after the Dixie Chicks, who were the #1 crossover country band, stood up and talked about W. So Swift was a kid at the time, and they said, you better behave like an obedient blonde girl and don't ever say anything. And that's how we got Taylor Swift's like, I'm so nice and sweet, I never talk thing. It's because the rednecks beat the Dixie chicks for being human beings and ethical. And so they'll behave like that. They'll be like, they have like this Ghislaine, like, I'm sweet, I manipulate the men around me and go along with them, and I help them abuse and crush people. And the men are just like making names like, they'll have like the weird sexual graphics and just be disgusting thugs. And it's so funny when they're on leftist accounts because then they'll be like, I'm ace. And it's like, if you're ace, why are you posting so much? You post like an antisocial 19-year-old boy. You post like just the most degenerate, disgusting, sexual, violent, aggressive things, but okay. So it's really funny when they pose as leftists because their personality is so far removed from any left progressive. But when they pose as Nazis, it's super believable because their natural personalities are congruent with being a far right oppressor because they are. It's the only thing about it when they're posing as Nazis is that they actually think race is power and religion. They when they post that part, it comes across as a mockery because they know that's bullshit. Yeah. So the ass liquor of Billionaire Brigade, the cartoon PFP accounts, pretending to be leftists and Nazis, all working for billionaires that will stancil shadow boxes, all on the same team. I can't fucking stand this. They managed to make progressive labor movement nazism. And I'm at the point where if they're calling someone a Nazi and they're saying they're a left leaning person, I'm translating that now as they must be asking you to focus on economics and the capital holders and not the culture war. That's all that means. It doesn't mean they're regressive in any way or they hold nativist views or any kind of nationalist, ethno nationalist views. They're just trying to get you to see the real issue is the capital holder. So I'm now interpreting that whenever they call someone who's saying they're left and they're a Nazi, is they're scared of that message because they work for the billionaires. So be aware of this online. If the cartoon PFPs and people like Will Stancil, these billionaire dick suckers, if they're all saying someone's a Nazi, it's probably because they're not down with the billionaires and they're actually trying to make real social democratic changes. I don't know what to make of Mamdani at this point. I do know Mamdani's from a wealthy global elite family, so I'm. It's like when I was hoping Harris would win, like that's how I feel about Mamdani. Like, I hope he's real. But let's be real. He's from a global elite family. They were all pushing for him to win. And they don't do that for any Democratic Socialist ever. I'm going to have to conclude he might be fake. But I have hope he's real. Or they got some kind of scam where his role is to role play the socialist that destroys New York, to turn people off to ever asking for any kind of socialist change again. Because I can't help but notice this formula. Other than Mamdani, any democratic socialist gets called a Nazi, gets run out of town. It's why I think something's up with this. Like, you're telling me only for this guy they're making, nah. He's got to be, plus he's from an elite family, so that's another clue he might be fake, right? Anyway, just food for thought. If they're calling someone a Nazi, it's probably because they're trying to get you to pay attention to their boss and how he's robbing you all blind and killing the country.